Welcome to Confessions of a Founder, a podcast where we pull back the curtain on the entrepreneurial journey. I'm Allie Burger, and each week I sit down with successful founders, CEOs, and innovators to explore the raw, real stories behind building a business. From the highs of success to the moments of self-doubt, we get into the lessons learned, risks taken, and the human side of entrepreneurship. If you're looking for insight, inspiration, or just a little reassurance that you're not alone on your journey, you've come to the right place. If you're a Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark fan, I have a treat for you today. When I first started thinking about launching this podcast, she was the number one guest I wanted to have on this show. She doesn't normally do public speaking opportunities, and yet here we are. It's a pleasure to introduce you to Rio Phior, the former creative director of Lucasfilm and co-founder of Sagon-Phior, one of the top branding and creative agencies in the world. At just 26, Rio became the creative director for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, playing a pivotal role in rebranding and creating emotional connections for the Star Wars original trilogy and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Rio has directed marketing strategy, branding, and creative campaigns for over 3,000 brands and 100 nonprofits, including the Olympic Games, Sony, Disney, Ford Foundation, DreamWorks, Microsoft, Fox Broadcasting, United Nations, Honda, Columbia TriStar, Warner Brothers, Hard Rock Cafe, Viacom, Random House, Nestle, Princess Cruises, AMC, CBS, NBC, IFC, Universal Entertainment, Callaway Golf, and American Heart Association, just to name a few. She's a mentor of mine and one of the closest people to me in my life. I've learned so much from her when it comes to how to handle yourself in business, how to negotiate, how to create and communicate a vision, how to handle fear, from the high level to the nitty-gritty advice, tips, and tricks we're all looking for. It is a gift, a pleasure, an honor to introduce you to Rio Phior. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Confessions of a Founder wherever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us bring more stories of resilience and innovation to listeners like you. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in to today's Confessions of a Founder. Rio, welcome to Confessions of a Founder. I'm going to try not to tear up because this is the most special interview that I get to do for the podcast. For those of you who don't know, Rio is a mentor of mine in my life and an advisor to Etta, my business. It is an honor to be able to share your wisdom and your lessons of life and business with everybody today. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks, Allie. That means a lot to me. And I think you're pretty special too.
Thank you. Okay, so first, Rio has created some of the most iconic brands and characters of our lifetime. To give a few ideas of that before we jump into her whole business and how she got to where she is today, Rio, can you share just a little bit about what some of the work that some folks might have seen of yours out in the world?
When I was working with George Lucas and Spielberg as their creative director, I got to work on the early Star Wars trilogy, developing the marketing, advertising, consumer products, and also the publishing that went out into the world. And so, crafting what that looked like, that brand, was part of my job. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about it is that I was only 26 years old at the time. There were only two people, maybe three or four people in the company who were even in their 30s, and it was a very young, fun group of people. And I was brought on to kind of really steer the brand, globally on every level. And it had been kind of a little out of control with Star Wars, when it first came out, because you've got, a brand new film that just took off like a juggernaut, and nobody really, was manning that area of the business because it was just, exploding. And so what happened was there were, all these different bizarre products out, which had no consistency. I developed a brand guide, which I don't know if there was such a thing in the entertainment industry at that time, but to help maintain and control and manage the brand. And then, so I was doing all of the character illustrations for that, developing the color palette, the fonts, kind of creating a whole look for what the brand needed to look like. So those are some of the films. I mean, there have been many, many others. Basically, every major entertainment studio, from Disney to we helped launch the Disney Channel, Fox Broadcasting. We helped launch Fox Broadcasting, Cablevision, American Movie Classics, Independent Film Channel, Women's Entertainment, Bravo.
You've helped create the origin stories for a lot of great characters out there. What is the origin story of Rio Phior?
My parents would ask me where I came from because I always said I didn't come from here. And they'd ask me where I came from, and I'd always point to the sky. I'd point to the stars. And I'd tell them that's where I came from, not from you. So to go to the real origin, it starts there. And I grew up in very, very poor, in South Central LA. At first, there were 7 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. The house was given to us by relatives down in South Central, so we moved there. And I kind of grew up under unusual circumstances. Being the white person, I was the minority, growing up in mostly all Black neighborhood. It was the ghetto in those days. That's what they called it, the concrete jungle. And I grew up understanding what it felt like to be the odd man out, the person who was different. So I guess my origin story starts with really unusual beginnings that way. I feel that it gave me a different kind of insight or compassion, empathy, for anyone who feels some sense of stigma. I can understand what it feels like to be different, to be the odd man out. So I think it does, you become raised with a certain level of empathy that maybe I sense sometimes other people don't have. So that level of empathy and ability to read people is how I feel like I'm able to climb inside my clients' heads and feel what they're feeling and see what they're seeing. Because very often what I'm doing is I'm just giving back somebody what they want to create because I can see it for them and feel it.
You are an expert at that. You have climbed into my brain a time or two as well. What was the first paid client experience like for you, and when was that?
Wow, I've never been asked that. My first paid client. I don't know if I have memory of the very first. Maybe. I think it might have been a law firm. I was doing a lot of odd jobs when I was young. And at 13 years old, I started working in law firms. I had an older sister who was the top paid legal secretary in LA, and she would bring me in, and I started polishing the leaves of plants when everybody had plants in their offices. And, I get paid $1 an hour for that. And that was a lot of money in those days for a 13-year-old. And I got so bored with that, I asked what else could I do. So she started teaching me the filing system there. I started filing. And then after filing, I started helping to improve their architecture, how the jobs flowed through the offices. So I was in high school and I was helping different law firms set up their filing systems so that they could operate more smoothly. Working 9 to 5 in the summers for a boss in law firms from the age of 13 to about 20, that made me realize I will never, ever in my life have a 9 to 5 job or a boss. I just decided as a kid that wasn't going to be for me. So that eliminated that right there. I saw how miserable everyone was, and I didn't want to be one of those people. And I felt like a caged animal, somebody being held in captivity, doing things that I wasn't even interested in doing. And I thought, if I have to live the rest of my life like this, I would rather be dead. And so I had, when I was 14, one of my teachers, English teacher, submitted some of my film reviews to the LA Daily News. And they started I ended up getting a column being a teen film critic who was going to the movies. I went to the movies all the time. I was a big movie fanatic. What I did is I just write about them from a teenager's perspective and what I thought about them. So I got that column in the Daily News. So I thought that was a little bit of a breakthrough because I had a lot of teachers telling me, oh, you should go into art. Other teachers telling me, oh, you should be a writer. So I thought, well, I'm going to be a writer because this just happened, so I had my column going and I realized, wow, you can make money doing this too. Pretty cool. And seeing movies that you really like to see. Now, this is more my cup of tea, not that 9 to 5 under the fluorescent lights, trapped in an office all day. And you can write from anywhere, which makes it even more exciting. I also had an interesting kind of pivotal job, I think, that helped me realize something else. My dad would always say, there is no limit to sales. And so I experienced that when I was 15 because I got a job working in a boiler room selling trips to Las Vegas over the telephone in the days when people had to pick up their phones. And I would literally cold call right out of the white pages. I just go down the list, starting with the A's, all to the B's, to the C's, calling every human being in LA, trying to sell them. And I started noticing that certain pitches weren't working on people, the pitch that this guy gave me. And I thought it was pretty bad. So what I did is I created this kind of geometric tree on a big piece of butcher paper. And I had, well, if they say this to this, then you go down this track. If they say this to this, then you go down that track. I had every possible answer that they could have to my questions. And all of my questions would give them answers and guide them back to the close. I started selling everybody these trips. I was making so much money. I went from minimum wage to the equivalent of a teenager today making $300 an hour. Oh yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, and he had to pay me because that was his deal. It was based on how many people I could close. And so he grabbed the thing out of my lap. He goes, what's that thing under the desk? And he made copies of it. And he gave them to everybody in his boiler room. And he said, follow this pitch. Get rid of mine. So, and then everybody started making sales. It really wasn't that hard. So I came back there, a few months later. I would come in after work and do it. And then, and I figured it was worth it, even though I didn't like it, because at least I was getting some money, store it up. I ended up buying a car. I ended up going to Europe and buying a whole new wardrobe with that money. I put it back into myself to make everything better. And he ended up closing up the place. I guess he made so much money, he moved on to another place. This guy was Sonny Bono's cousin. I do remember that. Isn't that fun?
What happens next in the story of Rio?
I'd say getting into art center. That was a life changer because I and also I had a high school counselor. When I realized how well I could do on my own, and I could go into boiler rooms wherever I wanted and rewrite their scripts and make a ton of money, I thought, well, who needs to go to college? That's just going to slow me down. So my counselor thought I was nuts because he said, look, you've got 4 academic scholarships here waiting for you who will pay for you to go anywhere you want in the world. Full board, Rio. And you're not going to go to college? And I said, oh. He said, do you know how much money that's worth? And so I started weighing it. I went, well, it might be nice then to go to college. He said, it's too late. The only college that still had openings was last minute, was Cal State LA. So I went, okay, I'll go there. And he said, at least you can figure out what you want to do. I said, I don't know what I want to do. And he goes, but that's why you want to try everything. Just take classes in everything that you possibly can. So I went in as an English literature major since I figured, I'm a writer. I figured I'm a writer already. So, take English literature and see if I can learn more. And I really liked it. And I took every elective I possibly could, tons of art classes, because I thought art was really interesting, and a lot of phys ed classes, lots. So art, phys ed, and English literature. Those were my groups. Anyway, what happened is the art classes that I took I loved. And I was taking this one drawing class, and I met this teacher I would talk to every day outside the drawing class during breaks. He taught the class next door. I remember his name was Al, and it was an environmental architecture class. And he started asking me, how do you like the students in your class? And I thought, that was a really weird question. I said, they're okay. He goes, oh, they're just okay? He goes, I happen to agree with you. And I said, how do you know them? He said, I'm talking about their art, Rio. And I went, oh. And he said, so who's that guy? And I said, that's the teacher. And he said, no, I thought you were the teacher. And I said, no, don't I look a little young to be a teacher? He said, yeah, I thought you were really young to be a teacher, but that guy can't be the teacher. He's not any good. I said, well, why would you think I am? He said, oh, because your work's great. I walk around. I said, yeah, I know. I've seen you in there. He said, I thought you were the teacher. And I said, no way, man. No way. My work's horrible. He said, you're wrong. Your work's great. And I was like, really? He said, why are you wasting your time at this school? And I said, well, I'm exploring right now. I don't really know what I want to do. And he said, you should be at Art Center. That's where I teach most of the time. I just have this one class here, but I'm a part-time teacher because he was also a professional. All the teachers at Art Center at the time were professionals teaching. I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. So I went over just to check it out. I couldn't believe the work on the walls there and the stuff that was going on in the classes. I was sneaking in and looking, and their museum walls were just blow your mind incredible. And I thought I would do anything to be able to paint or draw like this. Anything. Al said, let me get you an appointment. And I said, okay, let's do it. So I went there, and I went there with a bunch of loose paintings and sketches and some metal sculptures and some wood sculptures and plexiglass sculpture, just a whole mishmash of stuff in boxes. And a really crappy folder that had all my drawings in it. And I don't think they'd ever seen a mess like that in their lives before, but I didn't even know what a portfolio was. Nobody ever told me. I basically talked my way in. And then the next thing I said was, and I said, I have 4 academic scholarships and my way is paid without any questions. No collecting from the parents, no nothing. You guys, I'm paid for. And the guy said, you know what? I'm going to have to say yes. And I was the last person admitted. And they told me I was the youngest person they'd ever accepted at Art Center with the least experience. So I was like, oh man, am I going to be in for some real competition, especially as I'm looking at that art on the walls. I was so scared but excited at the same time because I didn't mind being bottom of the barrel, you know, as long as I knew I had an opportunity to prove myself.
So where did life for Rio evolve after school?
I was working in law firms, you know, to make my way through college. And as I was working in this one law firm, I met this gal named Michonne, who was the executive to the guy that ran the law firm and executive secretary. She ended up becoming the executive secretary for the head of Wells Rich Green Advertising. And she said, Rio, you should somehow figure out how to bring your portfolio over here. And I said, how? I'd be happy to. Michonne goes, why don't you meet us at the watering hole, you know, in Century City where all the agencies go on Friday nights to drink. And I went, okay. So I met over there. I never brought my portfolio because that would be a weird place to show your work. And so what I did, at that point, I had a really nice portfolio. I had an Art Center polished portfolio and I knew what one was. So anyway, Michonne invited me over and I didn't know what to do. I just sat there quietly and she said, you need to tell people what you do, Rio, you know, so they invite you up to show your portfolio. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm not good in a group because I'm, you know, kind of shy. So I had just read this book on palmistry and I memorized all the pages in the book and what everything on your palm means. And so I started talking to this one gal and I was looking at her hands and I said, oh, did you know you have the blah, blah, blah mound of Venus or whatever on your hand? And she said, no. She goes, do you know about palmistry? I said, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. And she gave me her hand. She goes, can you read it? And I said, sure, why not? So I started reading her future for her on her hand. And then I had a whole lineup of other people who wanted their palms read. And they were like, oh my God, this is so accurate. It's so amazing. And I was like thinking it is. Okay. So I got invited back every Friday to read palms for all the people at Wells Rich Green. And then while you're holding somebody's hand, you get to talk to them a lot. And they started asking me, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm an artist. And they go, are you working upstairs at Wells? And I said, no, but I'd love to. And they said, well, why don't you bring your portfolio up and show it around? Oh, is that an invitation? Sure. So that's how I got my portfolio in the door of what was considered to be the hottest agency in the nation at the time, with probably the most award-winning campaigns of anyone. And it just happened to be the only agency run by a woman, Mary Wells North.
And that all came about from amateur palm reading.
Can you believe it?
No.
Just because I memorized it was one of those little 5 and dime palmistry books. I still remember a lot of it to this day. It all starts flooding back.
Wow.
Isn't that odd? So they brought me up. I went in, showed my portfolio. They gave me Mike Salisbury, who was the creative director for Columbia Pictures. Columbia Pictures ran all their work through Wells at that time. Ended up hiring me to do some illustrations for a film, for, movie campaign called Ice Castles. And so I did that, and they paid me. And then it was all men in those days. It was definitely a madman environment, where people, were smoking in the office, and they had their drinks, laid out. And Christina used to smoke. She was English, and she smoked this long cigarette holder device, and she'd wear long black dresses to the floor. She was very unique and really cool. And I liked hanging out with her, and we would write copy together for Max Factor, for their TV spots. And then I did the storyboards. I would, design the storyboards. And then another fellow, Bob Grimaldi, who was another art director there, ended up hiring me to work on the Britannia jeans logo. And he said that he had hired every designer and design firm in the world that mattered. And they hated everything that he'd ever shown them for their logo. And I said, "Oh, great." I said, "Is that what you want me to work on?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I didn't see any logos in your portfolio." And, as an aside, I had never designed a logo in my life. But he said, "Can you design logos?" And I said, "Well, of course I can design logos. And I don't see, why would you think not?" And he said, "Well, I didn't see any of those in your portfolio." And I said, "Well, how do you know I don't have another portfolio for just logos?" He said, "Bring it in tomorrow." Yeah. I said, "Oh no, I have a way better idea." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Hey, why don't you give me the assignment, and I'll design as many logos as I possibly can over the next 2 days, bring them all back, and you can pay for them or not pay for them if you don't like them. Pay for them if you like them." And he said, "Well, how can I say no to that?" I said, "You can't." So I went home, and I stayed up literally for 2 days in a row without sleeping, designing as many logos as I possibly could. Yeah, I designed like 18 logos in a couple of days. And then I had them all done in beautiful, I don't even remember the name for it anymore, but they were all in full color and perfect. They looked completely finished. They weren't just ideas, they were finished, beautiful, comprehensives. And I brought them in, and he goes, "Oh my God, these are great." And he paid me so much money for them. My brain almost exploded. I thought, is this what logo designers get? My goodness, I'm a designer. I went from being an illustrator to a designer just like that. And so he said, "So you are an illustrator and designer?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I told you." So anyway, he said, "Well, then come on in, because I want you to hire you for the next 3 weeks to fill my entire office, floor to ceiling, with logos." I said, "Oh, heavenly days. I love that assignment." And then he put me on developing the ad campaign. He wanted me to sketch all the ideas for the ads. He had a bunch of ideas. He was a brilliant art director, very award winning. And then one of the secretaries came into my office, and while I was working on Britannia jeans, and she said, "Hey, the head of the agency is looking for the head of creative. Just walked up to me and asked me if you're an art director." I said, "What did you say?" She said, "Yeah, Rio's an art director." And so she shuts the door behind her, and I said, "Well, what's an art director?" And she said, "Well," she said, "it's somebody who like puts all the words and the pictures and everything together to create ideas for what the campaign should be." And I said, "Well, I can do that. I must be an art director." So anyway, she went out. She goes, "Well, I'll tell you how much they make." And it was like 3 times what I was making. And I said, "Well, I'm definitely an art director." And so he came walking into the office, said, I want 2 campaigns for Max Factor. and I need them done. He only had a week to put them together before Mary Wells Lawrence, and the head of Max Factor was coming in for a big agency presentation. I said, okay, no problem. And then I had to scramble, man, to find out how to build comps, how to have people set my type for me. I knew enough to be dangerous. I just had never done it before. And so I came up with these really cool ideas. One kind of very more clinical and clean, and one very kind of emotional and glamorous and sultry. The whole ad was handwritten I hand wrote the entire ad, and it was supposed to be the model talking to you about, how she felt, after using Max Factor. And so they loved both of them. And then, so they made me an art director. And so now I went from literally being an illustrator to a designer to an art director within a month, less than a month. And so that's how that worked out. And then the Lucas experience, I have to thank Mike again for that. He gave me my first break. And he also was contacted by Lucas to be his creative director. He wanted Mike Salisbury. And Mike said, I'm on contract here. There's no way. He said, but why don't you talk to Rio Phior? And so they said, okay, let's give me her information. We'll contact her and get her portfolio over here. And that's how that contact happened. Literally, this all happened within a few months, after art school, after art center. It was like a snowball effect. I always say, you're on the right track when life feels like you're part of a snowball rolling downhill, and it just starts gaining momentum and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you just don't want it to stop, because that's what it felt like, when I was on that, snowball ride, I'll call it.
So what was it like the first time meeting George Lucas?
Oh, he's very sweet, very quiet man, very kind, very generous too, super generous. And it was not easy getting ideas out of his head about what he wanted. But not easy for me, not easy for a lot of the other guys, that worked on the productions. So I asked him so many questions. And I always say, don't be afraid to ask questions, because it's the only way you can get a real picture for what you need to do. I would ask him so many questions whenever we would meet that literally his lips would start quivering. Like, I think he was nervous. I made him nervous because I was like climbing inside his head, I think, and he wasn't used to that. I don't think he was used to, he was surrounded by a bunch of guys, who were just trying to figure out what he wanted all the time. And he had stamps where he would stamp, and I can't remember exactly what they were, but I think one was good or okay, and another one was like no, and there was another one that was like great. But I heard that he never pulled out his great stamp. So you kind of got 3 different responses with his stamp system. And I liked working with him. I didn't have as much interaction with him as I did Marcia Lucas, who was his wife, who really ran that company. She was a real business mind. She was also Academy Award winning film editor too. I mean, smart as a whip. And she was way into the day to day, and kind of George was more working with ILM and working more in the background. But anything that had to do with business or facing the world, Marcia really ran a lot of that.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
No. And
Yeah.
what was the atmosphere like creatively when you stepped in, and how did that evolve once you were
It
there?
was amazing. It's a feeling like I've only felt a few times in my life before, where everything, he understood work-life balance and all of that. He had a kitchen and a chef right there at the egg company in Studio City. There were trees growing through the building. It was just natural light everywhere. It was a place you didn't want to leave. It was so beautiful. Big couches and places to hang out. I mean, he was way ahead of his time. And it was just a really incredibly creative environment. And I loved being there. I loved going in. What was really funny is literally, like, I don't remember whether it was 3 months. I think it might have been about 3 months after I had been hired. I heard that he had fired like 120 people or more from the company because he really didn't like Hollywood. He didn't like the direction the company was going. He didn't like what the investments were being made were. And then he decided to only take about 30 people with him up north to San Francisco. So everybody was sitting on pins and needles to find out whether they were going to get hired or fired that day. And that was a scary day for everyone. But very luckily, I was one of the first people the president of the company, Bob Grieber, asked up, and he said, "So Rio, do you want to come with us?" And I said, "Oh, you mean I'm not getting fired?" He said, "Absolutely not. You're one of George's picks." And I went, "Wow, cool." And he said, "So whatever amount of time you need to think about this, because it's a big move and all of that." I said, "Okay, I thought about it. Yes." he, he went, "Whoa, that was fast." I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" I mean, I gave them a commitment for a minimum of a year to stay there because I was really had my own business and I didn't want to lose a lot of my clients and I wanted to be able to go back to that eventually. So yeah, it was a great experience. I got to meet so many cool people too, so many creative, just a crew of geniuses all working in one space together.
You have some really incredible stories from that time that you've shared over the years. Any that have been pivotal to your career that you want to share?
Well, I think one of the smarter things that I did was after I'd been there about a year and a half, I negotiated a deal with the president of the company and George to bring in an art manager to manage the consumer products, the division that I had set up. And what I wanted to do is have them, I already set up all the systems. All they had to do was follow them and go to meetings. And it was not the fun part of the job. I just wanted to do more of the marketing and advertising, coming up with the ideas and stuff like that. Then, in the publishing, somebody had come in and negotiated that deal away from the company for Random House to manage. So there were no more books that I was going to get to design. So I thought, well, I'd like to then just take the advertising outside of the company. So that's what we did. I brought Melanie, you know, she was the designer, the graphic designer with me. And we set up a little company right out of our place in San Francisco and started working with Lucasfilm as our first client. And I did the Return of the Jedi campaign that way. And I ended up getting Coppola as a client too, and worked on the Raiders project with Spielberg. And then I got the Levi Strauss as a client and the San Francisco Ballet. And then a few others. Oh, 20th Century Fox too, because they had real close relationship with Lucasfilm. So, and then we got Warner Brothers. So, and then Columbia Pictures. And so I had a good reason to move back to LA, which is what I always wanted to do. So moved back down there with Melanie, and then we kind of took off from there.
And when did Glenn come into the picture? Your co-founder?
Glenn was the creative director for Columbia Pictures and my client. So he would always say, "Oh, I see your invoices, you designers, you art director people, you make way too much money." And I said, "Why? What do you make?" "You see what I make. What do you make?" And he said, "Not enough." And I said, "Well, why don't you stop whining and complaining and come over to the dark side? Take a chance." And he wasn't sure if he really wanted to do that or not, but he eventually did. What he did is he ended up recommending a client to me that was humongous. BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated, the world's biggest music publisher. I think their competitor might be ASCAP, but they're not really even competitors in my way of thinking, because one represented more rock and country, the other one's more jazz and pop. So it was an entire rebranding and over 360 ads a year. That's a lot of work for one person. Who I only had 2 production people helping me, who they were my little elves at night. I would do my work and I'd do all my designs and my writing, give it to them. They'd make it happen overnight, do all the mechanicals, and then I'd hand them in to my clients. So yeah, Glenn finally decided to come over because he recommended BMI. And I went, "Oh my God." I said, "I can't do all this work by myself with my 2 elves." And he said, "All right."
You have worked with many incredible clients. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I want to note to people listening is that Rio is one of the most savvy business owners I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And that so much about how I operate Edda and my consulting business comes from many of the strategies that you utilize in your world. And the way that you have grown is also super unique in that you have had a 50+ year career at this point in the branding space, and yet you keep your team purposefully super lean. The goal was not for you to grow out this massive agency, which I think is a lot of how people define success or growth. Oftentimes, when in reality, when you look at the back end numbers, that doesn't always make a lot of sense. No. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, a volume is not equivalent to profit. That is all you need to know. I'd rather have a handful of really wonderful, amazing people doing the most and having them be the smartest people I know, making me better too, as we all make each other better, than I've already been there. We grew. We sold that company. We grew to probably about 50 people and had layers and layers of people. And I didn't even talk to clients. I didn't even work on assignments anymore. It was all about growing the agency and reporting numbers back to the holding company. I've done all that. And I thought, when I was done, I was happy I did it, very happy. But I just wanted to start over and just be just little old Rio again with her band of creative people having a good time. And I realized when they offered to, double Glenn's and my salary, then they offered to triple, then they offered to quadruple. And we kept saying no because they wanted us to grow into this monster entertainment consortium, working with a lot of people that I really wasn't thrilled to work with and doing things we really weren't thrilled to be doing creatively. And I realized then that, money doesn't matter. Money comes as a byproduct of what you love, doing what you love. And I think you can have really unhappy, very wealthy people and you can have very, very happy ones. Or you can not be wealthy at all and just be doing what you love. It's really about, I don't think money brings you a lot of love. It gets rid of a lot of headaches, but it isn't what moves me. And profit, I don't really care about that. And I mean, I just want to make enough so that I know I'm okay. And everybody that who depends on me is okay as well. You know, my people are okay. So I guess everybody needs to find out about that in their own way. But we found out, and we found that out in our 40s, which was relatively young, to realize, you know what, I just don't want to do what I don't want to do. And I will forever be evolving and changing and doing the things that I want to do, not because somebody's offering me a bag of gold, but because it's what makes me happy and want to wake up every morning. And I would recommend that to anybody because it's really the way to go. I have a lot of very unhappy friends, you know, who have slogged through their lives and just have, you know, waited and looked forward to retirement. And to be honest with you, I even told you, Allie, this. I said, I hope you want to hire me when I'm 90.
I will
I hope you think I have some value.
I will want to work with you forever and ever. And ever, amen. Of course.
Yeah, I want to stop. Why would you stop doing what you love? Why would you stop? You know? And I feel like with what we do, we help so many people. I feel good about helping people, especially working with over 100 nonprofits by now, you know, and helping them make money, helping them grow, helping them get their message out. It's so much fun. It's just fun. And I like to, you know, I guess I'm a kid at heart that way. I always will be. You know, maybe it's not for everybody, but it works for me.
For those of you who this is the first time you're being exposed to Rio, which is a lot of people, you don't love doing these kinds of things, which I'm very grateful you're willing to do this with me. But Rio actually keeps me young. So she tells me what cool shows are on and what trends are cool and all of the fun things. I feel like I learn about everything from you. It feels like.
That's so funny. You know what? I end up calling Medicare and they go, how old are you? You don't sound like anybody who calls in here.
You don't look or dress or act like anybody who calls in there either.
Oh, well, thank you, Allie. There isn't a show that I don't watch or music that I don't want to learn more about. I have every genre in the world, you know, that I do my own mixtapes, you know, and I've got one for everybody on the planet. I'm always very surprised at how people get locked into verticals, you know, with their taste. And I don't ever want to be like that. I want to always be open. What's new? What's cool? What's happening now? And I mean, I love sharing like news publications, new ones that come up. Like I love, you know, the AI journals and all that stuff that we get to look at and learn about. And you have the same kind of mind, I think. You're always wanting to grow and expand and learn more. And I think that's kind of like a key to youth, you know, just being always open to learning more. And you can never learn enough. And we can never, I mean, I have somebody who works for me who I really admire, Bill Fate. He said, you know, life is about constantly perfecting oneself because we can never be totally perfect. And that just really resonates with me. His other adage is finding peace in your soul and with yourself and the world around you, looking for that peace. And if you can't find it, create it.
You have created an incredible corner of the universe. Well, it's not really a corner because most of us have seen your work all over the place in many aspects of our lives. But one of the things that I love about you is how thoughtful you are with the types of clients that you take on and problems that you solve. Can you share a little bit about the selection process that you go through to determine if someone is the right fit for you to work with and if they quote unquote move you in the right way?
Yeah, I always say, I have it on my LinkedIn page too, that if you're somebody or you have a project, a brand, or whatever it is that you have, about you that you need help with. As long as you're looking to make the world happier, better, people healthier, just to improve this place that we're on together in some way, shape, or form, you already have my attention. I mean, it starts with that. And as far as interesting projects I've worked on, gosh, I mean, all my projects are interesting. I love everything that I'm working on. We work on the United Nations Girl Up movement. Women, there is no equality for women in the world. Women are not equal, not even in the United States. We still get paid 80% to every, 100% of a dollar, that men make. It just starts with that. It's still a struggle. And if you really want to look at the tough places in the world, like Africa, the Middle East, some areas of South America, Girl Up is in all of those places. And what they are doing is they're training and raising activists, young female activists that want gender equality. Me and my partner got to create a whole new rebranding. And to do a rebranding, you're talking with all of these girls all over the world on these Zoom meetings, just little squares on your computer, but they all represent that country and that area. And it's really fun to talk to them. And you learn so much about color. I mean, that these colors don't work in this nation because they already represent this or that. You really have to have an international awareness of color and its impact on people. And not only color, but shapes. What kind of shapes work and what kind of symbols work or don't work. I mean, you can really offend people by using the wrong shape, symbol, or color. So that was a very fun project working with our partner, and our partner worked on the PR crisis management end of this, and we developed the brand guide for them. So that was fun.
Wow, wow, wow. You get approached by everybody under the sun to work with them. And you also, because of your business model, you have the opportunity to work with a bunch of different types of artists and copywriters and folks in the branding space. Many on this call are in your industry and also looking to get into or maybe start their own agency at some point in time. What are the biggest things that you think make a firm stand out against others? And when you're looking at somebody, you know that they really have it versus it's probably not a fit.
I will say that we discovered early on, because we were entertainment marketing experts, myself and my business partner and all the people that worked with us. And that's what we were sought after for. But I started talking to Glenn and we boiled it down to something really simple. I said, what we do is we create something visual and with sound that makes someone excited. It makes them feel something. It makes them want to get up out of their chair, get in their car, and go pull some money out of their wallet to go see more of it or have more of it. And we do that in about 48 hours. I mean, literally, it's like having something fly off the shelf. So, and that's what we're really good at. But why are we good at it? Because we're able to take all that prose that goes into someone's story about their product, their service, their movie, their TV show, whatever it is. Everything has a story, and boil that story down into a short line or a few short lines that sing so loudly and connect so deeply with people they can't help but notice. And supported with an amazing visual, something like, whoa, they have never seen before, that really sends that message home. That's what we do best. I used to talk to George about this. What we want to do is take prose and turn it into poetry, visual poetry too. So I think that's what we do best. And if you can't capture someone viscerally at the gut, in the emotional area of their body and their being, then you're not winning. You're not going to win them. You have to care about how they feel. And so, and really understand that as though logic plays a role, people don't buy anything or do anything unless they really love something and they feel a connection with it. So it's emotion that motivates people. It's not their heads. I think figuring that out for us, we built our business around that. You know, if you go to our website, you'll see we tell that story. That's a difference. And I think a really, really good advice for younger people who are just trying to make it is just, you can't give up. I have a young man, you know about him, Parnell, right, Allie?
Yeah.
Who we brought in and trained for a year. He was virtually homeless, but he had amazing talent, and you know, helped him make some money and get better at what he did. And he ended up taking all of this work and turning it into a portfolio, beautiful website, getting a lot of clients, doing well for himself. I was like, yes, go take on the world, Parnell. Now you can take care of yourself. And so he called me, you know, a couple of years after that, and he said, Rio, what does it feel like when you finally get to the point that you know, don't have to worry about work anymore? And I said, well, I wouldn't know. I always wonder what's next. I don't know. We just do projects. Sometimes we have real, you know, holes in our time where we need to fill it up with something, and there's nothing there, you know, because we were so busy working, we were never out doing any outreach. So I told Parnell, I said, if you can't get used to the feeling of the tide rolling out and being empty for a while and then rolling back in and then being full and you being able to handle it all, then this isn't a business for you. So it's kind of like feeling like you're on a wave and you know you're going to get sucked out to sea every once in a while. And then, but you can always count on that big wave coming up behind you and the swell pushing you right back in to shore. And you have to get comfortable in that feeling. And if you can't, then you're going to be one stress mess, you know, most of your life. And I would say, you know, being an entrepreneur or founder is not really for you. I used to tell my students, there is something really exciting and cool about every time I've done this, walking out. This is a metaphor, walking out to the edge of a cliff, and you know you're going to have to jump. When I told those guys that, yeah, sure, I can design some logos, I was on the precipice of this cliff, this metaphorical cliff, and I went, I'm going to jump, because I know that every time I do that and every time I've done it, these like invisible hands come up, scoop me up, and take me to the next mountain that's even higher. And every time I'm not afraid to jump off the next higher mountain and let those invisible hands take me and scoop me up to the next higher mountain, I get stuck. So what I'm saying is, to live with a little bit of fear of the unknown is a good thing. It's a good thing. People who just live in that state and never move and never take a leap don't get anywhere in life. You kind of just have to love the thrill of that, or see what it feels like. Go jump off the cliff. Go know that you're going to be okay. And it's scary because you feel like you're falling, and then woo, all of a sudden you move up to the next mountain. That's kind of how it works. And I'll tell you another thing, Allie, that really works too. The most amazing things that have ever happened to me in my life have been when I call it like synchronistic experiences start happening. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. It's probably happened to everybody at some point where like this amazing thing happens where certain things all come together in space and time and everything is working just perfectly for you. And I've noticed that that happens more when you're not in a rut and when you don't live by habit. That when you completely break your quantum reality, you break through it and you do something radically different, something where you don't know what's going to happen next, and you are not a routine being anymore. Everything starts magically coming to you and coming together. I don't know how to describe it any better way. I probably should think about that and think about a better way to describe how, to me, it's like you're putting a tear in reality, because reality is based on your computer program having you go through every day doing the same thing. And when you break that, you crack it, that's when magic happens. So get out of your routine, get out of your habits, and start doing things that you love, that just come to you, that just make you excited, or that make you scared. It's okay to be scared.
The way that you're able to conceptualize and articulate all of these difficult emotions that we go through as entrepreneurs, and the uncertainty and the ups and downs of that are so important to talk about. And I think that your ability to move through those, you know, people say move through the emotion, don't try to fight it. Your ability to move through that, and kind of what it sounds like you're talking about a little bit, is almost reveling in that feeling of the falling, is such an important aspect of this that I think people give up too soon, almost because they are so afraid that the hands aren't going to show up.
And they always show up. They always show up. And that's, you have to just believe, you literally have to believe in yourself and believe in the universe or whatever the heck it is, you know, that you're going to be taken care of. You're going to be that little bunny who's got a patch of grass out there it's going to show up for you. You made me think about something else, Allie, the fear factor, reveling in the fear, because it's not really fear, it's reveling in the unknown. And you have to view it that way and not as fear. Like, you have to want to know the unknown. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a trapeze artist. And you know, I ended up getting into gymnastics, and I loved the uneven parallel bars, the pole vault, you know, balance beam. I was like, you know, you have to let go and fly through the air with the greatest of ease, doing flips, and then come back and hope that you know, hang on to that thing. If you're not willing to let go and just go to the next parallel bar, you're never going to do it. I think I started through sports, you know, individual sports. I was the tiniest person always in my class. So I wasn't really, obviously good at gymnastics and not good at the jock sports, but doing those kind of things was fun. And then I liked racing motorcycles, raced motocross in high school, and jumping over ravines, flying through the air, nothing underneath you, and praying you're going to land okay. I mean, that kind of is exciting. You know, it's fun. And you know what? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Oh, maybe you might fall. Okay. Somebody's going to catch you. Somebody's going to come get you. You know, you'll be okay. It's not that terrible. Nothing really is that terrible.
One of the big superpowers that you have also, that is something that you've watched founders struggle with too, is compartmentalization. Oh. And that is a skill that is often learned, and I know is something that you have grown to become an expert in.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so I hear I compartmentalize way too well sometimes from my husband. Because I'll be sitting right here on this couch and watching maybe a show or looking at my phone or doing something more, you know, non-cerebral, social. And I'm done with the day. I did my work. Everything's done. I'm out of that creative box. And now I'm into like connecting with the world and seeing what's happening. And he'll come in and we share a couple of mutual clients, and he'll start talking about work. I just look at him. I go, I'm not in that box anymore. It's like having boundaries, knowing when to just say that that's not what we're doing right now. We're not going to be doing that. And you have to be able to shut it down. If you can't shut it down, it will drive you crazy. Because I was there, where I had a gallery contract and I was producing on the same level as every other artist that this publisher had, doing maybe 10 paintings for a show, like in a 2-month period of time for all my shows. And I was working full time doing Sagon-Phior. We were Eidolon at the time, the entertainment boutique. And I'm carrying on the career of a full-time artist. I'm traveling all over the world for gallery shows. And then I'm also running this business. So I literally would wake up in the morning, jump in my car, have a cup of coffee, go to work all day, come home, grab a bite to eat, then start painting from 9 at night till 3 in the morning. And then I'd sleep for about 4 hours, and I get back up and do everything all over again. And I didn't know how to like stop anything or stop my mind, from spinning always. Because while I'm doing the art, you have to be into the art to do it. So I started forcing myself through my art to compartmentalize and just cut out the world and just be in that art space. And then when I would leave the art space, okay, I'm in my car now. This is workspace. I'm on my way to work. And then everything would start flooding in. Oh gosh, we got a meeting over at Columbia Pictures. Oh gosh, we got another meeting with the guys from Disney. Oh gosh, we've got 7 projects we have to get out by the end of the day. Are we going to have enough people? Do I need to call some more artists in? You're in that mode. Did I ever think about my art? No. Although I could have oh, how am I going to finish 10 more paintings for this show? How am I going to I just wouldn't do it because it was just crazy making. So I had to shut that down. I really don't like it when people say, oh, I'm a really great multitasker, because I don't believe in multitasking. I believe in multitasking is just someone doing a lot of many, many things really poorly, because the only way you can do something amazingly brilliant and wonderful when you are so quieted, your mind is so quieted and so focused that you can channel whatever it is you need to focus on and make happen. And that takes concentration. It does not take flip from one little box into another little box. You got to stay in the big box and don't let yourself out. Spent a lifetime learning how to do that. Now I'm way too good at it. I mean, to the point, you could tell me somebody died and I'm like, because I'm still in my other box. And then I'll get out and go, did you say somebody died? I mean, you can go too far with it.
Rio, we have covered so much ground today. I can't even quite articulate to the audience. We have barely skimmed the surface on all of the incredible stories of your life and all of the lessons that you've learned. Are there any pivotal moments or wild stories that you haven't shared that you think would be good for the audience to know?
Sometimes I get involved in businesses and ideas just because I really want to help somebody, and it's something that I find interesting. It might have been one of those, I have a bucket list. It's pretty long of things I want to do. I probably, will never outlive my bucket list, but one of them, and I know this sounds funny, but it was, how about starting an independent record label? I mean, music was missing from my repertoire, right? And I love music. And so I had an independent recording studio built it in my house and someone running it. We were doing just a lot of demo tapes for writers and bringing in a lot of really great singers to do the work and musicians. And then they take those demo tapes out and sell them. So then we brought on one rock this in the days of rock, but it's a little more popular. Brought on one rock group and said, well, let's see what this is like. And so I ended up flying into an airport one of those little airport cubicles, those private ones you can, break off. I think it might have been in Minnesota at the time, and met with the head of Navarre Distribution. And I was able to, with my two partners in this venture, to negotiate the first single artist record national distribution deal in the history of music. And you know how I did it? By sheer believing in what I was doing, 100% believing in it. Literally, I pulled out all of the one sheets. I pulled out the album. I had all the proofs there. Everything's ready to go on press. All the CDs had been minted. Everything was perfect. The masters were done. And I laid the whole campaign out in front of the guy and everything we were going to do. And he just went, wow. So you've got all the promotion, all the marketing, everything already worked out. And I said, yeah, you don't have to do anything. You just need to distribute my record. And I said, do you have a contract? He said, well, it just happens that I do. And he pulled it out and he said, but I've never signed a deal like this. I've just met you and we're sitting in an airport. And I said, well, what better place? And he said, why would I really do this with you? I said, because number one, you're going to make a lot of money. And number two, these are proofs. I got to sign off on them and everything's waiting in LA on press. All I have to do is make a phone call and tell them to hit the presses and everything's done. And I said, one phone call is all it takes based on you signing right there. And he said, all right. And he signed the deal just like that. It was so cool. I was so proud of that. I had two partners with me. One was this fellow who was the head of the Cabana Boys, which was also a promotion company, record promotion company. And I had Cheryl Regan with me, who's one of my best friends in the whole world. Her husband had been guiding us, Russ Regan, no longer with us. May he rest in peace. An icon in the music business. I had him as a mentor. I say one of the smartest things you can do is to always have a mentor. Seek out the people that you most admire and bring them into your halo as much as you possibly can. And you'll be surprised. They're not used to people asking them for help. They're not used to it. And most people just want to help. So it can't hurt just to say, could you give me some advice on blah, blah, blah? Or could you help me with blah, blah, blah? Hey, the worst they can do is say no. So I say, go for it. Pick up the phone, call people, email them, however you can get a hold of them. Hey, I used to plan, I would find out where people were and I would plan to be there at a certain place and time just to run into them. That's kind of how I met the people, at the watering hole for Wells Rich Green. I knew where they were going to be and I put myself there.
We have covered, as I said before, so much ground. You've given so much great advice. Is there anything, I could ask you a million more questions, but I know that I've taken up a ton of your time. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you feel like would be good for the audience to know?
I did not know what I wanted to do for a long time. I mean, when I graduated from art school, I was like, okay, so now what? My dad told me something that was really smart. He said, you know what? Go try everything. He said, at least you'll get closer to by finding out what you don't want to do, you're going to find yourself closer to what you do want to do. So I don't think everybody is necessarily always that driven. You may have a driving personality, but it doesn't mean you have a clear picture of where you want to be or what you want to do. I never had one. I compare my life to flowing down a stream. I let the current take me where it would, and I never said no to the current. I always said, yes, it's okay. You can take me around that bend. Okay. You can let me hit that rock. It's okay. Whoa, now I'm floating. This feels great. I like living life as a river, something like a light willow branch that's just floating around on the river and smiling up at the sun and sucking in all of the changing environment around. Because if you allow life to take you where with the opportunities it brings you and you keep saying yes, you're going to end up living like a river and floating down that river. And one day we'll probably end up in the big ocean somewhere, and then there'll be something completely different. That's probably where we go, to the ocean and the sky, or wherever that universe is that's next for us. It's Khalil Gibran. Yeah. He has the most beautiful poem about the river and the ocean.
Is it called Fear?
Yes.
It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way.
It's nature, to be afraid and to be one thing and then become another thing that's even bigger or better. You have to tremble just a little bit before you enter that new place that you're going to be, that where you know so much more and can do so much more.
We've talked a lot today about your past and your present. What do you hope for the world in the future?
My biggest concern is for young people. I've just seen so much how the world's changed and opportunity has changed with the advent of AI. Our world will radically change. There's that one feeling that I have, and then I have another one. The other one is I love how young people are so much more open-minded than when I was coming up. I mean, we have a much more beautiful society in how young people are willing to embrace one another. People are willing to really actually think about getting along. They're just not locked in their tribes. I know people naturally want to gravitate to tribes because there's safety in that. But there is more of a willingness now to mix tribes or tribes to meet one another and converse. There's an openness there. And I see that as a huge change in how it used to be. Things weren't like that before. You grew up in that one tribe. You went to school with that tribe. You went out into the world and you kept that there. It's much more exploratory now. People are more willing to kind of open their minds and go, okay, I'll put my thoughts on hold and listen. And I think the more you listen in life, the more you learn. I've spent a lifetime listening. I don't talk that much except right now. I like listening, and I think we have a better listening society that's come up, and I have great hope for the future because of that.
It's beautiful. Rio, thank you so much for joining Confessions of a Founder today. I appreciate all of your insight and wisdom, and I know that so many others will, in addition to laughing along to all the hilarious pieces of some of the stories that are part of your pivotal history. Plug yourself. Where can we find you, your work? How can people get in touch with you to collaborate with you?
You can find me at Sagon-Phior.com. S as in Sam, AGON -PHIOR.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me, through there.
Rio, thank you. Thank you. And that wraps up our first episode of Confessions of a Founder. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and took away valuable insights from our incredible guest. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this episode with someone in your life who could use a little entrepreneurial inspiration. We'll be back next Tuesday with another founder who's ready to share their story, their struggles, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So be sure to tune in, and until then, keep chasing your vision and embracing the journey. Thanks for listening.